This cop couldn't help himself by running a lucrative scam. And these two politicians just can't seem to find themselves out of trouble. Let's get right into the worst people to put in charge. Number 5. Side gig. UK Police Constable Daniel Aimson wanted to supplement his income in order to enjoy the finer things in life. Expensive meals, incredible vacations, and whatever else he felt he and his wife deserved. So obviously, the best way to do that was to sell hundreds of fully loaded cable boxes online, as well as illegal substances. Aimson's cable boxes cost UK cable companies, including Sky TV, anywhere from £500,000 to £5 million in lost pay-per-view subscription revenue. Aimson sold roughly 1,640 cable boxes through various online outlets from Amazon to eBay. His cable boxes were loaded with apps that allowed users to watch Sky TV, BT Sports, as well as blockbuster movies for free by circumventing paywalls. Aimson made over £655,000 from his sales. Aimson and his wife Rachel weren't exactly inconspicuous with their added income. They regularly enjoyed fine dining meals at Michelin-starred restaurants, often spending over £500 on the meals alone, taking vacations to luxury spots like Marbella, Spain, and Venice, Italy, as well as purchasing high-end luxury items like Rolex watches. Aimson's business achieved enough success that he was able to use the Barclay Card app, Barclay being a major UK bank, for his web transactions. Aimson laundered all incoming money through a bank account and firm he'd set up in Rachel's name, as well as funneling money through his mom and sister's bank accounts. While both Daniel and Rachel were charged, only Daniel was sent to prison after his guilty plea, while his wife was able to walk. Aimson began running his cable box scheme while he was already out on bail for another crime. Aimson, a huge fan of Breaking Bad, was arrested for renting 2 houses on the same street to produce and sell illegal organic substances, lifting the idea directly from the show. He was known to be proud of his double life and was often seen sporting his Heisenberg t-shirt. As his cable box business boomed, Barclay Card became suspicious of Aimson's company, A1SIM Limited, and after running a review of it, handed their suspicions over to authorities. Aimson was investigated by the Federal Against Copyright Theft, known as FACT, a private entity that specializes in copyright infringement. FACT purchased one of Aimson's boxes alongside police. The illegal software was discovered, and Aimson was promptly taken back into custody. Aimson was handed a 6-year, 4-month sentence for his previous crime and an additional 12 months for his cable boxes. Rachel pleaded not guilty to laundering, and her charges were allowed to lie on file, meaning the courts had enough evidence to make a case, but it was deemed no longer in the public's interest to do so. The couple has since split. Rachel must not have wanted to be pen pals. Number 4. Scam games. Ohio's Mark and Sharon Dente were living the American dream of owning their own successful real estate business, buying and flipping houses. By day, Mark was a basketball coach at a local high school, and as a side hustle, he and his wife Sharon started buying and flipping houses. The only problem was they were doing it with other people's money, and the houses did not exist. The Dente's house flipping business bilked millions of dollars from investors in a Ponzi scheme. Simply put, a Ponzi scheme is a scam in which investors pay into an investment fund, in this case real estate, and are then paid out initial inflated sums to lure other new investors with the promise of huge gains. Then rich friends go tell their rich friends. When it comes time to pay out, the scammer pays with new investments. As long as new investors keep contributing money, the scam works. The Dantes claimed they were buying houses at low market costs, renovating and quickly flipping them under the cover of their 7 businesses in their firm, Dante Businesses. Dante's initial pitch to potential investors leaned on the popular investment TV show Shark Tank, where he simply explained how he could buy something for $1 and sell it for $3 and promise investors returns as high as 20 to 30%. 35% over the course of 9 months. However, in true Ponzi fashion, the real estate deals investors were told about were fictitious. As the business slowly became unmanageable and investors started having trouble getting their payments, the whole scheme began to fall apart. Dente's company scrambled to issue promissory notes it couldn't fulfill, and requests for patience as defaulted loans began to pile up. So where did all this investment capital go? You'd probably think the Dantes used it for charity work or for fighting crime or something. But they actually bought a vacation home, paid off their own home, bought a house for someone else, paid their children's college tuition, bought jet skis and boats, ate at fancy restaurants, which seems to be a theme with these guys, as well as covered their own day-to-day living expenses. Everything except actually buying and flipping houses. Mark Dente is such a garbage human being that he had no issue scamming a friend he'd known for 36 years. She's 77 and he took $1.5 million from her without a second thought. Dente ended up scamming over 690 investors out of $109 million. As of August 2022, the court appointed a receiver, someone who manages property that's subject to a bankruptcy or foreclosure, to manage Dente's properties and attempt to recover the money to repay the victims. Receivers often have the authority to sell off these properties and various other personal assets in order to recover stolen money, but the process can take years. Number 3. Not the cops. Deputy Joseph Bobadilla and Sergeant Rebecca Evans, two off-duty sheriff's deputies living in Dallas, Texas, were hired to guard a Home Depot that had partially collapsed after a tornado hit. With half the building exposed and no one watching, no one ever expected either of these doers to be getting more done by walking off with over $2,000 to $3,000 in merchandise. The scam Bobadilla and Evans ran went something like this. Evans would walk into the store and grab expensive tools, as directed by Bobadilla, walking out with them under her coat. She would then take pictures of the tools, tell them to Bobadilla, who could then pick them up and pay Evans her cut in the process. Bobadilla then headed over to another Home Depot in full uniform, returning the still wet, unopened merchandise for store credit. Home Depot, being the observant little devils they are, quickly caught on. The second time Bobadilla returned his stolen items, one of the boxes had marked 6503 on it. Bobadilla had no way of knowing that it was a store number, and guess what store that was? The one that got caved in by a tornado. Once the Home Depot employees were aware of the scam, Bobadilla was unable to return any more stolen merchandise. After being unable to return items 2 times in a row, Bobadilla didn't get suspicious that Home Depot might be onto him. Instead, Bobadilla returned days later to spend his store credit. After Home Depot's corporate office tipped off the sheriff's department, arrests of both Bobadilla and Evans were promptly made, and both officers were terminated. Sergeant Evans, a 16-year veteran, quickly waived her right to silence and allowed herself to be interviewed by investigators. According to Evans, the whole plot, Bobadilla's idea, that he suggested how Evans was to sneak the merchandise out, and admitted she had accepted 2 payments of $250 and $500 from the ordeal. Deputy Bobadilla had only been with the sheriff's department for 5 years at the time of his arrest. He was sentenced to 45 days in jail as part of his 4-year probation. Evans was sentenced to 2 years probation and will not serve jail time. According to Home Depot, the grand total of the theft and subsequent purchases with store credit totaled $2,398.57, with $500 in merchandise still unaccounted for. As of February 2022, both former officers would avoid conviction if they successfully completed the terms of their probations. The officers got off with relatively light punishment, but for Rebecca Evans, it looks like a permanently tarnished 16-year reputation can be found on aisle 5 for only $750. Number 2. Mr. Scandals. Mahajer can't seem to stay out of trouble. Mahajer, a former deputy mayor of the city of Auburn in New South Wales, Australia, has sampled a whole buffet of criminal charges ranging from restraining orders, assault, and drug charges to various civil suits, driving offenses, and electoral fraud. It's like he went to a golden corral where the only thing served is all-you-can-eat felonies, and Mahajer was asked to leave because he ate too much. In 2012, Mahajer and his sister Fatima worked together to rig the election in Auburn that got Mahajer into office by enrolling voters who didn't live in Auburn to vote for him in Auburn. Once in office, Mahajer took advantage of what political clout he had to throw the most opulent wedding Auburn has ever seen, shutting down major streets and having the wedding party arrive in luxury cars and helicopters. Mahajer was sentenced to only 21 months in prison for his election rigging, but would be eligible for parole in 11. At the time of his incarceration, Mahajer seemed very sure he wasn't going to be put away for very long, along, telling reporters he might see them soon while strolling out of the courthouse, like some sort of weird prophecy. Fatima immediately pled guilty to her 77 charges and was given a 2-month jail sentence and a $500 good behavior bond. What's the best way to avoid one of your many court appearances for assault? If you guess by not assaulting people, Salim Mahajer would disagree with you. He would suggest that you pay some hapless woman and 3 of her family members $10,000 to stage a slow-speed car accident with your best friend Rafi Nouri. Plan was for Mahajer to get into an accident driving his $100,000 Mercedes SUV through an intersection on his way to court. Nouri would ride in the passenger seat, in contact with a passenger in the back seat of a rented Mitsubishi via cell phone, and attempt to coordinate their paths. The first attempt failed, as Mahajer arrived at the intersection too early and had to do another lap around the block to try again. 5 minutes later, and resetting their positions, the second attempt was successful in completing the deliberate slow-speed collision. Mahajer was able to complain of neck and back pain at the scene and had to dramatically be cut from the vehicle, resulting in court being adjourned. Success! When it came time to pay, his conspirators never received anything close to the promised $10,000, instead receiving only $3,600, of which the driver and her husband received a paltry $1,600. It was discovered by the court that Mahajer had taken out a $150,000 insurance policy on his own car 9 days before the crash and filed a claim within hours of the crash. The 4 accomplices quickly pled guilty once their involvement was discovered and showed sincere remorse for their action. Among fines, the driver and her husband received 1 year and 3 months and 2 years respectively. The backseat brother-in-law and his wife luckily got community service because they're parents to 3 young children. So Mahajer orchestrated a car crash plot, totaled his own car, and ruined the lives of 4 other people that he scammed as well, just to plead guilty to the assault charge he was to appear in court for, and only got a 3-year good behavior bond as punishment. At least he got new charges to add to his collection, pleading not guilty to perverting the court of justice, as well as conspiracy to defraud for his car crash scam and insurance fraud. Mahajer was paroled 11 months after his initial sentencing for his election fraud, and he did see a reporter soon, his prophecy fulfilled. So instead of behaving, Mahajer quickly got himself arrested again and was out on bail again. But Mahajer felt he should have less oppressive bail conditions set in his current situation, such as living back at his own mansion, a relaxed curfew, better internet access, and the ability to return to social media so he could better pay off the $20 million he owed to the Australian tax office. The judge, responding very much like a parent to a petulant teenager, said no to most of this and stated that not being allowed on Facebook and Twitter didn't mean he was being oppressed. The judge did reduce one of his bail conditions to only having to check in 5 days a week, so there's that. Since Mahajer was so concerned with the repayment of the owed $20 million, the first thing he did to get cracking on this massive debt was to throw a 3-day birthday bash yacht party for his Instagram model girlfriend, Melissa Taiso. The party had to take place only during the day so Mahajer could be home for his curfew, and included multiple wardrobe changes for Taiso, a massive floral arrangement spelling her name on the back of the yacht, with balloons as various arrangements adorning the top of the sides, as well as several food items including mini ice cream cones, several birthday cakes, and chocolates. A fireworks show ended the event, but Mahajer never got to see it because of his oppressive curfew and couldn't even post pictures on his social media accounts. Mahajer has so many charges and counts against him that we haven't covered because it would take too long, and this isn't a 4-part Netflix documentary. But it could be if you're watching Netflix. As of June 2022, Mahajer was attempting to sue his 17 former business partners, the biggest of them being SC Lowy Primary Investments and Alliance Property Group. Mahajer received a loan for a proposed residential development in his hometown of Lidcombe called Sky Point Tower, but defaulted on that loan. 2 of his development companies were eventually placed into liquidation by his creditors in 2017 in an attempt to resolve the default, and in 2018, Mahajer was declared bankrupt, still with a debt of $24 million. In his lawsuit, Mahajer claimed the actions of the defendants prevented him from paying his debt and caused him to suffer nervous shock. Mahajer sought $52 million in damages. The suit was promptly thrown out as Mahajer was found to be making baseless accusations against the defendants that he was forced to either back off on or drop entirely. The defendants then pointed out 10 other current lawsuits made by Mahajer that were likely going to be unsuccessful, as they were only meant to harass and annoy the other defendants. Mahajer's lawsuits failed so spectacularly spectacularly that not only was he ordered to pay his defendant's court costs, but he is also now banned from filing any sort of civil suit in New South Wales without permission of the courts after he was deemed a vexatious litigant. He's currently serving a 2-year, 3-month term for lying under oath and won't be eligible for parole until January of next year. Number 1. Cleared. Andrew Yakubu must be the elusive Nigerian prince that has been sending out all of those successful emails requesting financial aid. The former head of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation was discovered to have millions of dollars locked away in a safe in his house and has been accused of money laundering. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, or the NNPC, is a former government-owned petroleum company operating in Nigeria and overseen by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the Azani Alison Maduki. Alison Maduki appointed Yakubu as General Managing Director, or GMD, of the NNPC, naming him the 4th new GMD in a 5-year span. She publicly claimed Yakubu was chosen because he was an engineer with a sound technical background that could guide and staff the NNPC's newest strategic subdivision, the Nigerian Petroleum Development Company, or NPDC. Due to the high turnover of the GMD at the NNPC, sources close to Alison Maduki said her motives were more political, viewing Yakubu as more of a yes man than a leader. Not long after Yakubu's appointment to GMD, Alison Maduki learned that he was anything but a yes man, and the two aggressively butted heads non-stop for the entire 2 years Yakubu was in office. Yakubu's house in Kaduna, Nigeria, was raided in February of 2017 after a tip to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, or EFCC, a watchdog group funded by the Nigerian government to investigate financial crimes, often targeting individuals laundering money. During the raid, the EFCC found roughly $9.8 million and 74,000 pounds hidden in a safe in Yakubu's house. Yakubu showed up days later to the EFCC's office and admitted that the money and house were his, but when asked to explain all that money, he said that it was all just gifts from friends. Surprisingly, the completely not shady explanation of the millions of dollars simply being gifts wasn't enough to get Yakubu's case dismissed outright. That took a few years. After the EFCC closed its case against Yakubu in response filed a no-case submission in which the defendant claims the prosecution has failed to compile enough evidence to justify a guilty verdict. The presiding judge agreed with the no-case submission, citing the prosecution's failure to explain exactly how Yakubu came into all that money and was inclined to dismiss the whole case. However, the judge was still unsatisfied with the totally legitimate "my friends gave me some money" explanation as well, and ordered Yakubu to defend himself against the money laundering charges. Yakubu was acquitted of all charges in March of 2022 when it was found by a new presiding judge that Yakubu not only had credible evidence, but was reliable as well, because apparently Nigeria is in the upside down, and that makes sense. More so, however, the judge scolded the inept prosecution for utterly failing to even investigate Yakubu's claims that the money was just gifts from friends. Instead, the EFCC simply claimed that the money was given as a lump sum that had never gone through a financial institution, so it would better fit with their money laundering charges. Because the EFCC never offered its own explanation as to how Yakubu came into possession of the money, the court felt the explanation wasn't enough to refute Yakubu's own evidence. The judge was forced to rule in favor of Yakubu's shadow of a doubt and promptly return the entirety of the confiscated sum. Looks like our Nigerian prince finally got his money back. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section who you trust the most, Democrats, Republicans, or Nigerian politicians.